You've got to be careful about throwing around words like medical miracle, but what a Scottish-American doctor did to change the life of a Peruvian Indian boy comes very close to being just that. The other half of the miracle is what that little Indian boy did to change the life of Dr. Ian Jackson and his wife Marjorie. Dr. Jackson heads the Department of Craniofacial Surgery at Providence Hospital near Detroit. 16 years ago, while working at a hospital in his native Scotland, he went to Peru to work on charity cases. One of them was that little boy, David. It was almost the last day of Dr. Jackson's visit when a young Swiss charity worker brought a 2-year-old Indian boy here to the San Felipe Clinic for help. The whole center of the child's face was missing. Dr. Jackson had never seen anything like it before.
There were 2 eyes, and there was this jaw up on the middle of his forehead and nothing in between. I really couldn't believe what I was seeing. No teeth, no upper lip, no nose, nothing really up to his lower eyelids, and all the bone was missing.
The boy David was an Ashaninka Indian from the Amazon jungle. He had been brought here to this hospital for poor children in Lima 18 months earlier. His father had carried him in a dugout canoe to a mission in the jungle, and the mission had brought him here for help. What was wrong with him?
At first we weren't really quite sure. Then the next thing that came up was, could this be leishmaniasis? Leishmaniasis is a condition where there's a particular organism which is very destructive to the tissue. You get it in the Middle East a lot and in South America. And this is carried by a sandfly.
When they said to you, will you help him, what did you say?
We had a good look at him, and I explained this is a very complicated problem, and I obviously can't do it in Peru. And I said, I shouldn't do it at all. I said, if he came to Britain, yes, sure, I would be prepared to do whatever I can.
The Jacksons returned to Scotland the next day, and a few weeks later, to their surprise, David arrived at the Glasgow airport. Marjorie Jackson went to meet him.
He was just pathetic. I mean, he really was absolutely pathetic. He was very tiny, David. I mean, very small.
Well, he hadn't had much to eat, we know that.
He had nothing to eat, not a lot anyway, and he had his little Peruvian hat and his poncho and little white boots. Well, I couldn't have done anything else but pick him up and hold him, but there were a lot of people at the airport who obviously were rather horrified.
And so this 2-year-old Indian boy, with most of his face missing, was taken into the Jackson household. 2 of the Jackson daughters, Susan and Linda, remember their first reactions.
I took one look at him, and all I could see were his big brown eyes. And his face didn't matter to me. It was just love at first sight, because he was so small. He was only 2.
He ate everything in sight. And in fact, that's just continued until today. He's still the same. He had never seen food like we had. He would eat the scraps off of our plates. He ate the butter out of the dish, simply because he was so malnourished. So that was an experience for us.
David had never seen himself, either in the jungle or in the hospital in Lima. Marjorie Jackson felt that he should see how he looked in the mirror so that he would understand what her husband was hoping to do for him.
We had to let him see how he looked.
And what happened?
And he was horrified. It really was.
He knew he understood, that's me.
He understood that was him.
And
he clearly understood that was him. Well, he was frantic. I mean, he really was frantic, and it was a great deal of anguish on our part too. To see this was awful, really awful. But we had to let him know how he looked, to be able to make him understand what was going to happen to him.
And so at 2 years old, the little boy from Peru began a series of surgeries in the hospital in Glasgow, borrowing bone and skin from one part of his body or another to form the new face. This was 17 years ago, before some of the new developments in microsurgery would have made some of this easier to do. But in its time, it was state-of-the-art. Dozens of operations over a period of years. And since David didn't speak English, his teacher, Mary Rodriguez, tried to explain to him what was happening.
We just told him the reason why that he was having all this pain was that Ian Jackson and Marjorie were trying to help to build a new nose for him. And he just looked in amazement and he said, am I going to have a nose, a real nose like everybody else? Yes, well, at least they're going to try and give you a nose like everybody else's. Oh, that's marvellous, he said. And that was all the explanation he needed then. And then the next thing he wanted to know was, would it be a big nose?
Well, David did get a new nose, along with a new upper lip made from his tongue, a new palate, and a new upper jaw. But there were weeks of pain after every surgical procedure. Susan Jackson remembers one operation.
He came home from the hospital. He couldn't walk very well. He had hip taken out. He had it put in his face, so his face was all swollen. But he is so courageous. The next day he'll be up, he'll be doing things, he'll be trying to walk on his leg.
Even today, as an 18-year-old high school student living in Michigan, David faces still more surgery. When you see pictures of the way you were when you came to your dad, what do you think? Do you think this is all...
I think it's amazing. So, I really do. Because compared to what I looked like when I was a young boy, towards now, I think it's incredible.
Do you know how many operations you've had?
Over 80 right now. Over 80.
More than 80 operations?
Yep.
So your next operation, you're going to get teeth?
And my jaw.
And your jaw?
Move back.
Move back. And then is there going to be one after that too, or is that it?
No, I think there's going to be another one where my dad's going to bring out my nose and make it straight, and then afterwards he might transplant some hair to make a mustache, and then revise a couple scars on my body, and then make my lip thinner, you know, just detailed things that I would like personally.
Is it difficult for you to talk about?
Not really. If I'm amongst friends or people I know or people that are really nice, like you, I can talk to you about this fine.
I'm going to be honest with you. You look to me like someone who was in a car accident.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Some people come up to me and go, oh, I know what happened to you, you're in a car accident. I would say no. You know, I'll tell them what really happened to me. Because I like to be open to people.
Of course, not everyone is that kind or open-minded. David, especially when he was younger, has been subjected to some cruel and thoughtless people because he looks different.
The grocery store was a particularly horrid incident because he was old enough, and I don't remember exactly what age, but he certainly understood English. And that was when the lady told him very clearly that looking the way he did, he should stay inside till Halloween. And you know, that was very, very hurting.
It's not all that long ago we were in the restaurant and people changed their seating arrangements.
Yes, people do that.
I don't know if I could contain myself. I'd be having fights with people all the time.
It's difficult. It's difficult.
What should people do? You know, I don't know what to do if I see somebody on the street who looks different.
I learned growing with David that it's much better if people are going to stare, let them come and say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, I'm looking, but what happened? Was he in an accident? And that's easy, much easier to deal with, and easier and much more comfortable for David.
But some people either look at me once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then go into their own group, and then they like talk amongst each other, and then they all look. And I mean, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. I don't know if that makes them feel uncomfortable because I'm there, or it makes them, you know, I just don't really like that.
I don't blame you. I know that I asked your mother this. She wants to go up and hit them.
So do I.
When David was about 7, Ian Jackson took a job with the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. The Jacksons were faced with a terrible reality. Without a birth certificate, David had become a boy without a country. He might have to go back to Peru. But by then, David had become his doctor's son. So the Jacksons decided to do legally what they had already done in their hearts, adopt him.
I don't think David has ever felt not part of the family. You know, I really don't think he has.
But you wanted to do it legally.
We had to do it legally because there would have been no other way to keep him in this country, because getting him
Before the Jacksons could go through with the adoption, they had to get permission from David's parents, who were still in the jungle in Peru. So Marjorie Jackson went down to find them. At the time, a BBC camera team photographed the journey from Lima, across the Andes in a small plane, and later through the Amazon basin. Finally, with the help of a mission priest, she met David's real parents.
I thought, what if they ask for him back? What if they say, okay, now he's got to come back? That was always at the back of my mind. That, of course, didn't happen at all.
Father agrees that that you should adopt him, as it will be easier for you to educate him.
And I said we loved him. He could see in the pictures that the children loved him. And he had not thought, you see, that David would live. And he was really very happy.
Did you have doubts in the beginning about taking him out of Peru, taking him to Scotland, removing him from the place where he was born?
I was naive. I thought we were going to do things and then send him back home again.
You both thought that?
Yeah, put a label on him, send him back. No, by that time I understood Peru, and I understood what was going to happen to him if no one helped him.
What would have happened to David if the Jacksons hadn't rescued him? Well, he probably would have become one of the niños de la calle, children of the streets, who spend their days scavenging, begging, stealing. They sleep on the streets, and they comb through these garbage heaps that are all around Lima. A small boy with a grotesque deformity at the bottom of the slums.
At very best, he would be a beggar, living on anything he could scrounge. There was no question of him, I think, ever going back to his own people. So he would become one of the hundreds of kids running around, living, I don't know how, but begging.
That's if he had survived at all, which is unlikely. But he did. And now, as a member of the Jackson family, David has gone on to change their lives forever.
David's made me a much, much better doctor. Really has. Not technically, but what goes on inside me.
He's taught you.
Oh, of course he has, yes. And it helps parents to know that their doctor suffers the way they do. For me, I think the important thing is really compassion for people like this, compassion and understanding, and not to look at the face, because behind that face is just a normal individual who wants to be normal and who wants to be treated normally.
When you talk to David's friends and family, the one thing they all say is that in spite of everything he's been through, he is fun-loving, laughs a lot, and likes to play jokes on people.
Even if I'm sad inside, I try to be happy, because I just don't want people feeling sorry for me and stuff. I just like to make people happy. But if I'm sad, I just don't want everyone else to be sad with me. So I express happiness and make everyone feel, joy, 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 And I like that.
And inside?
Inside, my heart's shredding.
It is?
I can hurt a lot, but then I look to my friends and my family for support, and that hurt goes away.
I would like people out there watching this to think, this could be me tomorrow, this could be my son, my daughter, or tomorrow one of us could have one of these awful tumours and need to have this destructive and reconstructive surgery. So we should
so be kind.
Be open, yes.
Be
Do
kind.
unto others.
Right.
Whoopi, and most everyone knows who you're talking about. That talented, outspoken ball of energy with the big smile and the often irreverent and sometimes X-rated mouth. Whoopi has a large appetite for the things that money can buy, as well as a need, when she's not working, for less Hollywood and more privacy. Just ask Ed Bradley.
This is the way I'm supposed to be living.
This is her retreat, her refuge, a lovely old farmhouse in New England, some 3,000 miles from the world of glamour and movie stars. It is here, miles from nowhere, that she says she feels totally at home.
The lights go out here a lot. Electricity goes out. And so there are things all through the house that you can just wind up.
The house is filled with art and flowers and things of beauty.
This is how, you know, Carol Lombard lived in the movies. You know, the grand piano, the fireplace, you know, the music that you hear on my funny old Victrola. It's too cold to prance around in chenille and silk, so I still live for work boots and jeans, you know.
Well, that's what you like anyway.
Yeah, this is me.
Mm-hmm. Chenille and silk, do you ever?
Occasionally. I've been known to slap it on periodically, yeah. Oh no, that's because I played it wrong. Okay, let's see, wait a minute now.
Today, Whoopi's life is in sharp contrast to the early days when she was poor. She's been a teenage drug addict. She had 2 failed marriages and lots of professional rejection. Several months ago, we spent some time with her while she was working in Los Angeles. She talked about her career and how it was growing up. She said she always knew she'd be famous. She also knew she wouldn't get there on her looks.
You know, when I was growing up, it was the Breck girl. Now, I knew I was never going to be the Breck girl.
The Breck girl had
blonde hair, you know, those waves, you know, and she had that little teeny-weeny nose and little thin lips, you know, and I always thought, well, okay. And then, you know, there were the Supremes. I knew I was never going to look like them. After one of the 4 Tops, maybe, but...
She was raised in housing projects in New York City and went to Catholic school. But she says she wasn't hip. She wasn't popular with the boys and always felt different from the other kids.
It was sad. I look at that little girl. She's very cute, that kid. You know, when I think of her, she was cute and she was nice, and they just didn't get it.
And her name was Karen?
Karen. Karen Johnson.
Karen Johnson.
Yeah. Her name is still Karen Johnson. You know, but she's added another dimension with Whoopi Goldberg.
In fact, she's added a lot of dimensions. Nightclubs, Broadway, TV, Hollywood, Whoopi's done it all. Even recently joining the ranks of the late-night talk show hosts. But she wasn't an overnight success, and getting there wasn't easy. By the time she was 18, she was divorced, had a baby daughter, and had decided to head west to California.
Left New York, got to San Diego, and went, I've made a mistake. I've made a terrible mistake. I don't know how to drive. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. There are lots and lots of stuff out here I've never seen but a palm tree. Ugh. You know, I'm from New York. You know, and everything moved really slow. You know, I came out like this, you know, hey, so what do I do now, you know? Somebody said, maybe you need to find a job. And I tried, but what could I do? I didn't know how to do much.
What did you do?
Well, I worked in a morgue.
In
so
a what?
became a hairdresser, a morgue. I did dead people's hair. No complaints, you know. You know.
What was that like?
Quiet. The thing I always wanted to do is I was an actor, and I really wanted to do more theater, and that's what I did.
She did get small acting jobs, but they didn't pay enough to support her and her daughter. And for several years, she had to go on welfare.
But you had the opportunity then to develop your craft.
Yeah.
And with the help of welfare, make a living off of it.
Yeah. And I thought that was what the idea was to get somebody on their feet so that they could take care of business, so that they could go and do the things that they were meant to do. My name is Fontaine, and love is my game. And when I kiss the girls, hey, they all aflame. Come on, let me kiss your hand. No, the one with the diamonds on it.
It was when she conceived these characters that she started to receive the attention that would get her career going.
One time, like, you know, like I was on the beach and like these people came up to me and they said, like, are you a valley girl? And I said, no, I'm a surfer, because before there was the mall, there was the ocean, okay?
Even as her career began to move forward, Whoopi realized that talent wouldn't be enough.
Going and auditioning and having somebody say, oh, no, you can't play Eleanor of Aquitaine. I said, why not?
you're black. I said, so what? They said, oh, but she was white. I said, but this is the theater, honey. You know, this is the theater. This is make-believe. This is not real. It was like, they floored me. And of course, getting into the movies, you know, was also like, no, here, you can't do this. This girl's supposed to be from the Midwest, like there was no black people in the Midwest, you know. So I get my feelings hurt a lot, you know, because I think that I can do anything. It never occurs to me there are things I can't do.
When she's in Hollywood, Whoopi lives in a small penthouse apartment at the posh St. James Hotel.
It's a long way from the projects, Whoopi.
Yeah, yeah.
She says when she's working, she prefers to have the kind of services a hotel provides. And since last August, she's been working almost all the time.
Oh, me.
Once again, Whoopi has stretched her talent, this time with her own late-night talk show. The show premiered last September to disappointing ratings, but she's determined to keep it on the air with her own laid-back style of interviewing.
You having fun doing it?
I am. Yeah. I like it. You know, I'm getting to meet all these people I don't get to hang out with.
But you're going to change now, right?
No.
You're not going to change the format? Somebody told me that you were going to change and have...
They lied. No, people lied and said we were going to change the format. I don't, you know, I'd rather have somebody else do the show. Because I'm too old for the, hey, so how you doing? Tell me about the book. You know, I just, you know, I can't do it. I can't do it. You know, I can barely make love once a day.
Well, whatever happens with the talk show, at the moment, Whoopi's movie career seems to be going full steam ahead. She got an Oscar for Ghost, and this past summer, she had a box office smash with Sister Act.
You feel you have the pick of what you want to do, or is it still hard for you to get a part?
It's still hard. It's still really hard. I mean, I would have liked to have done Silence of the Lambs. You know, there was no sex in that, so there wasn't no reason I couldn't do it. You know?
But they say you can't do sex?
Well, they don't say it anymore, because I've had my first sexy kiss with a man in a movie that's not coming out for a little while now. But suddenly, you know, at age 37, I've acquired sensuality and womanness. You know, they're just late.
It's always been there.
I think so. I haven't had much trouble.
Now, are you looking for something special today?
Yeah, I'd like your head on a stick.
The movie she was referring to is Made in America. Whoopi's co-star is Ted Danson. Since the picture, they've been romantically linked and found themselves in the headlines at the supermarket checkout counters.
What about the romance these days? I'll put it, Ted Danson. I'll put it right out here.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. Well, you know, it's Whoopi and Ted Danson. You want to talk about it?
No. I don't want to either negate it nor verify it. That's one piece of my life I think I am entitled to keep somewhat private and to myself, you know, because, you know, I'm not running for any office. And whether I'm running with one man or 18 men has no bearing on what I do. So, I don't know. But, no, I think I'll let people think what they like.
She was clearly anxious to keep that part of her life private, but wanted us to see the rest of her house in New England.
And then
Picasso?
Yeah, Picasso and Toulouse. And Hirschfeld.
She took us upstairs where there was more art, lots of books, and also a surprise or two.
So what do you keep next to your bed?
I have Wise Butter Popcorn. A Fun Saver flash camera, just in case I get, you know, some visitors or something. And these really weird jelly candies that I like. And I have my gun.
Your who?
My shotgun.
A real gun? That's just in case?
Yeah, you know, I'm out here and I'm by myself. You come on the property, I want to know who you are, you know.
And there are pictures of her family, her daughter Alexandra, who's now 18, and Whoopi's granddaughter, who's 3.
She cracks me up.
Yeah.
It's very funny. I talk to them probably every day.
Then she showed us what she calls her music room.
This is, as you can see, the head. People come in the head and they sit and they generally do their thing. But for me, I get bored. So instead of sitting this way, I spin around and I do this. I play on my dulcimer, which I'm teaching myself. There's a lot of self-teaching going on here. All right. Business gets done, you're up, you're out, it's great.
You're very different here than you were in L.A.
Yeah, I'm probably much more myself here. You know, it's just fast paced, you know, you don't get enough time, I don't get enough time to differentiate between me and that woman who does all that work.
And the horses you ride?
Yeah.
Recently, Whoopi was forced to make the time.
Hi, kids.
For most of the last 2 months, she's been here recuperating from pneumonia. And she's taken advantage of this precious downtime to teach herself to paint, to learn to play the piano, and she's begun work on a new stage show. The subject? One that's always been a sore spot, how people have reacted to the way she looks.
I've been really thinking about what's happened in my life. And what would I have been like if I'd listened to to all the suggestions that people gave me to improve myself?
For example?
Oh, you know, getting a littler nose, you know, changing my hair, getting caps on my teeth, liposuction on my backside. And my reaction to just different things that have happened over the last 7 years now, so it's about time to dispel some of it and, you know, have some fun. Have some fun.
Is this a good time for Whoopi?
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. I'm making movies and booked through the year, you know. And I'm in a pretty good adult space, you know. Yet still retaining my foolishness. You know?
Some foolishness. Whoopi's just signed to do Sister Act 2 for a figure she says makes her the highest paid actress in history.
The economy's stupid. That was the phrase Bill Clinton and his staff repeated over and over to remind themselves what this past election was all about. The real income of Americans has dropped over the last 10 years as the U.S. lost ground to Japan, Korea, and Germany. Now it's President Clinton's job to do something about that. But what? Well, one of the most outspoken people on the subject is Lester Thurow, the dean of MIT's Sloan School of Business. And he says to find out what America is doing wrong, you have to look at what our competitors are doing right. So we decided to take Thurow up on his offer. We decided to go not to Asia, the land of self-sacrifice, long hours, and no vacations, but to Europe. One of the stops, the Mercedes-Benz plant in Stuttgart, Germany.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The workers in this plant work 37 hours a week. They get 6 weeks vacation a year. Their standard of living and their salaries are certainly comparable, probably higher in the United States.
Higher than that in the United States.
How do they do it?
The basic answer is you work smarter. Working smarter means having high skills so you can use more sophisticated technologies than people can use who have a low-skilled labor force. You know, think about Germany, which pays wages way above American wages, yet they're a big car exporter. The United States can't sell its cars in the rest of the world. We have a hard time selling them in the United States.
Skilled workers, highly trained and well-educated enough to use the newest and most complicated technologies. We heard that from factory owners everywhere in Germany. From the Kalb textile plant in the Black Forest, which pays its workers $4 an hour more than textile workers earn in the U.S., and despite the high labor costs, still exports to the world, to the Trump machine tool factory near Stuttgart, which, unlike most American machine tool companies, is doing very nicely, thank you, exporting to both the United States and Japan. Trump's president, Bertold Leibinger, spent several years working in the U.S.
You have very innovative engineers. Your people have good ideas. But in addition to having good ideas, you need people who turn good ideas into good products. And the Japanese and the Germans have been better in turning good ideas into good products faster, with a better quality and with a lower price sometimes.
Take the ICE, the new high-speed train that departs Hamburg once an hour and runs the length of Germany. Top speed, 156 miles an hour, or roughly 30 miles an hour quicker than America's fastest train. Inside, it's the kind of place where you might actually like to sit and read for a while. Or you can watch television, listen to stereos, and if you need to work, there are payphones and conference rooms. Up front, computer-driven controls.
You know, the big thing to remember about it is this is not just kind of fun. If you can speed up transportation, you speed up productivity, and you speed up the effectiveness of your economy, and you speed up your standard of living. Every American I know would like to be riding in the train we're riding in at the moment. You're not going to ride in this train based on free enterprise in the United States. No such train will ever exist without government involvement. They can't be brought off simply by a private company.
Why hasn't the American government been investing in infrastructure?
Well, I think the answer is ever since the 1960s, we've simply let infrastructure in the United States slide. Why? Well, I think that's the great mystery as to why, you know, we're very consistent. If you look at the American family in the 80s, we saved less money than ever, which means the American family wasn't interested in its future. If you look at American business firms in the late 80s and early 90s, they're investing less in plant equipment than they have almost in their entire history. The American business firm doesn't seem to care about its future. And if you look at governments, they're putting less money into infrastructure and skills than they have at any time in their history, which means they don't care about their future. And I think that is the great American mystery.
The German ICE isn't even the fastest train around. The French have their TGV, which goes 32 miles an hour faster. And the Germans are experimenting with still another that's propelled by magnetic force. It will do 300 miles an hour. That's New York to Washington in under 60 minutes. In fact, some American cities are talking about buying one. The irony is that one of the key technologies for the maglev train was developed years ago in the United States.
You know, if you want to think about it, it's like the video camera and the video recorder, which were invented in America, perfected in Japan. So there are billions of dollars worth of sales and lots of jobs in Japan based on video cameras and video recorders. There are none in the United States, despite the fact that we invented it. But no Americans are involved because we wouldn't make the necessary investment. I think, you know, in the 1980s, President Reagan told us it was the decade of standing tall. And I think we were so busy standing tall, we didn't bother to look down and notice that this whole place was crumbling underneath us.
Not to mention above us. 40% of America's top scientists work for the Pentagon. And while the U.S. government was pouring tens of billions into supersonic stealth bombers to protect the free world, 4 European governments, France, Germany, Britain, and Spain, got together and poured billions into commercial aviation. The result? The Airbus, one of the hottest selling commercial airliners in the world today. Is it socialism?
No, I think it's called 21st century economics.
The way it worked is that the European governments that developed the Airbus had a ready-made market for the planes they produced. The customers were their own government-owned and controlled national airlines. The European Airbus Consortium has snatched a third of the world airplane market, and it's one of the key factors threatening the very existence of McDonnell Douglas. The U.S. response? President Bush protested this was dirty pool, unfair trade practices.
It's a little bit like a child at 2 years of age who has a temper tantrum, jumps up and down, screams, you know, yells and says, hey, you're cheating. The answer is the Europeans are not cheating. They're playing the game in a slightly different way than we play it in the United States. But increasingly, we're going to have to learn, you know, that's the world. And if we want to compete elsewhere in the world, we have to compete in the ways in which they compete. The question is, where do you come up with the big bucks, billions, to do the research and development to get you back into an industry?
And?
Well, the answer at the moment is the United States doesn't have an answer.
In fact, the Europeans may become an even more formidable opponent. They're in the process of merging their economies into a single market that will be larger than the United States. A united Europe with 350 million people.
For the first time in just about 100 years, the United States becomes the second largest market in the world. And if you want to think of it like the Avis and Hertz ads, America is going to be number 2, and we're going to have to win by trying harder. We can't win simply because we're the biggest, because we won't be the biggest.
Or the best, Thoreau says, until America learns, as the Germans have, to turn out a highly skilled workforce capable of running the latest, most sophisticated machinery. The Germans do it through a network of vocational schools run by private companies, like this one run by Mercedes-Benz at Stuttgart.
Is there anything in the United States that compares to this?
I don't think so. You'd find places where they'd have 1 or 2 of these tools, but you'd never find a place that had the kind of degree of equipment and the size of what we see here.
More than 1,400 teenagers study here, learning a whole range of highly skilled trades. They decided not to go to college, but instead of ending their education at the high school level, as they would have in the United States, they're able to opt into a nationwide program of vocational training, available to every German youngster. It's a rigorous 3.5-year program covering everything from computer programming to calculus.
Is the United States suffering economically and competitively, do you think, because there isn't a program?
Oh, I think every study that's looked at it has come to the conclusion that if you were saying what is the biggest American education gap, it's the fact that we have no system of post-secondary education for those people who graduate from high school but do not plan to go on to college. That's just the absolutely biggest economic gap we've got in the American education system.
Why is it necessary to create a vocational system, an apprenticeship system, if we're going to compete?
Well, the basic answer is a high school education, even if it's a good high school education, isn't enough for anybody in the modern economy, no matter what the job is.
And that situation will only get worse, Thoreau says, because the technologies of the future, everything from microelectronics to biotechnology, require even higher skills.
A lot of people would tell you they're more important than college skills. If an American engineer invents a new product, you can copy it. But if you look at these skills in the middle, if you don't have them, you can't build the product. You know, the Nobel Prize winners are nice, but they don't create economic success.
President Clinton is aware of the problem and has talked about setting up some sort of apprenticeship system or vocational training program. Nearly 30% of American students currently drop out of high school. If something isn't done, Thoreau says, America may soon have a third world labor force.
What do you mean a third world labor force?
They have the skills of people in underdeveloped countries. And the problem is in the 21st century, if you have third world skills, you will make a third world income, even if you happen to live in the United States. And it's one of the reasons why we're getting this kind of huge spreading out of the American distribution of income. The skilled are on an up escalator, the unskilled are on a down escalator.
Foot up. Before the United States can do anything about that, it needs to do something about jobs. Clinton's plan is to create new jobs by offering tax breaks to businesses that invest money in plant and equipment. Up until now, Thoreau says, too many Americans have been using their money to make money and not to make goods.
And then I think there was also a bit of an attitude, hey, we don't need to make the hardware, we don't need to do manufacturing. We can all be Mike Millikens and make $900 million buying and selling things on Wall Street.
Which brings us to something else the Germans and the Japanese have going for them, Thoreau says. And that is, their companies don't work alone, but in huge interlocking business groups. Daimler-Benz, which runs Mercedes, is owned and controlled by the giant Deutsche Bank, a bank whose executives sit on the boards of 400 German companies. Such a concentration of financial power has been illegal in the United States since the great trusts were broken up in the 1930s, in part after they were blamed for the Great Depression.
The Germans would argue that if you want to play in the world economy, you've got to have business groups like this to play against the Japanese. You can't do it as an individual company.
What are the advantages of it?
Well, the big advantages of it is if I'm running Daimler-Benz, I don't worry about a takeover in the stock market, and I don't have to worry so much about the short-run bottom line.
Why not?
Because my owner, the Deutsche Bank, is not going to sell me. They're going to work with me on a long-run strategy.
So you think we ought to go back to business groups?
I think we're going to have to go back to business groups. I don't think we're going to be able to compete without it because American business firms look at the short-run bottom line not because they're stupid, but because we put them in an institutional environment where that's exactly what they're supposed to do. But what it means is they won't make the investments necessary to be successful in the long run.
Yeah, there's some people out there would say, look, what are the Germans going to teach us? Their economic situation right now is arguably worse than ours.
What we've been talking about is the long-run operations and what's happening in the long run, not what's happening at this minute. And at this minute, everybody looks pretty sick.
And Thoreau says the only way the U.S. is going to get better is for the government to take more of a hand in shaping the economy. But the government taking a hand in anything terrifies a lot of people.
There's kind of a conception that, God, you don't want the government involved in private business and industry. They'll just screw it up like they've screwed up the post office and everything else.
Well, I think that's a very accurate perception of what many Americans have said. It isn't an accurate perception of how the rest of the world feels and how the rest of the world operates. And one of the problems is there are a lot of important things out there in the economy that government simply has to do. And it has to do it well. Government's in charge of education. I don't care whether you do it with vouchers or public schools. The fact of the matter is government's in charge of education. Government's in charge of infrastructure. And government, one way or another, is going to put a lot of the money into R&D because the time payoffs are too long for private firms to do it. And if government's incompetent, that doesn't mean you get rid of government. That means you make government competent, because you can't run an economy without a government.
I mean, it seems to me like you're talking about a massive overhaul, not just of U.S. government thinking, but of some ways private industry, the financial system.
I think it's a massive overhaul of attitude, an enormous change in the way we think about the rest of the world, and we have to approach economics the way we approach the Cold War. This is a game you want to win. This is a game you can't afford to lose, and therefore you will do anything necessary to win.